Welcome, everyone. Dr. Montoya, your opening remarks, please.
Madam Chair, members of the audience, this is one of the ongoing processes that we've used in the district. We actually are ahead of schedule in trying to have these committee meetings to prepare for next year's budget, which is a lot better than in the past. We've had already some previous meetings, and obviously we may have some more here in the upcoming future. So I think we've tried to solicit input and research and to cover as many areas as possible to present to the board a little bit later this summer a very positive budget for next year. So again, this is an ongoing process that we will be working with the board and obviously our other stakeholders, administrators and others as the process evolves in the next few weeks.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya. As we move on number 2, cost-saving proposal. Dr. Montoya?
Mr. Garcia, if you'd like to go ahead and begin, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya, Madam Chair. As the superintendent has stated, this is part of the process of developing a budget. We have been working on it now on a monthly basis, and we are coming close to the end. I know this is the April meeting. I think that if everything falls into place, hopefully by the first week in June, we'll be ready to actually approve and adopt a budget. So with that being said, if you go to tab 2, we went ahead and broke it up into yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And yesterday, what I wanted to show was where were we a year ago at this time. Remember that we were facing critical revenue shortfalls. We were coming up with different proposals, anywhere from proposal 1 dealing with about a $20 million cut to proposal 3, which was 52 million. Remember, we were working with prior administration and tried to come up with some plans as to how we could save some money. Some of the critical areas that we were talking about was less working days for certified. We talked about less working days for classified. Remember the big conversation, for lack of a better word, the reduction in the paid holidays. That's how we went ahead and adopted that, and then had to walk it back once we did the research. Also, less days for teachers and librarians, and then even the possibility of a reduction in force. Then, through the leadership of Dr. Montoya and the board, we were able to come back and present a balanced budget, no RIF, no tax increase, and things of this sort. So we've come a long way in a year. So with that being said, if you go to the next section, it's today. Where are we today? What are we going to be proposing? Today, we have included a chart of potential cost savings for this year. Earlier during the year, the board approved the early resignation incentive program, which a lot of our employees took advantage of it. We're anticipating that once we look at the positions that were actually, of the individuals that actually resigned, and then factoring in those positions that we're going to have to fill because they're in the critical need area, we should be able to save approximately $800,000. We have also talked about previously about advertising on buses and on our scoreboard, and coming back to the board during a policy committee to ask permission to change the policy to allow advertising especially in our school buses. We're anticipating about $155,000 of additional revenue that could be generated. We talked also at the last board meeting about the possibility of increasing rental fees for facilities, and that once we did the study, that can generate an additional $10,000. Then later on, we'll talk about staffing ratios, but we have talked about consolidating departments, becoming more efficient and effective. I know that that's one of the constant reminders that our superintendent tells us. We need to do more with less. We need to look at all our departments and come up with some savings. We're anticipating that we can actually save approximately $1.5 million more than what we saved last year. Then item number 5, which is an idea that was from last year, which we want to implement again this year. That's the purchase order cutoff. That's for all those purchase orders that are in the system. If the items do not come in, instead of carrying them over to next year, we'll go ahead and cancel them. Okay. They can start using next year's budget for next year's items.
Okay.
That one would save approximately $2 million. And then here's a little bit of a novel idea. It has a dual role. We've talked about trying to increase student enrollment. So what we want to do, we want to limit spending on the campuses to whatever their ADA is. Because remember, we generate our money through the average daily attendance. Therefore, if a campus is only, let's say, for example, at 92%, then they will only be allowed to spend up to 92% of their supply money. If those campuses that are at 98%, well, they will be allowed to spend up to 98% of their supply money. Okay. And what we're trying to do is give an incentive to the campuses so that they can start working on increasing their student attendance.
Encourage enrollment.
Right, encourage student
attendance.
Mm-hmm. And then capping our departments, which is all departments, at 95% of their budgets. Okay. By doing that, we can easily save an additional $2 million.
Okay.
Okay. Now, with that being implemented, we should see an increase in student attendance, which is number 8, and we're going conservatively here with 200,000. Remember that in addition to this measure, we also have now the system that will now be notifying all our parents whether a student is absent and things of this sort. So that's going to be implemented for next year, and we're anticipating for it to help us not only in case of emergencies, but also helping us increase our student attendance.
Okay.
Item number 7, and I'll give Ms. Longoria an opportunity. Up in item number
we're
7.
on tab 2, on the third or fourth page.
Right, the one that says potential cost savings.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Item number 7 is increased student enrollment. Currently, through different initiatives such as our STAMP program, and I know that we've made some changes into the selection criteria in our Brownsville Early College High School. So far, we have approximately 105 new students that were not in the district. These are students that are coming from private schools or coming from perhaps even charter schools that are coming back into the school district. We would like to have another 100. So with that being said, we're anticipating about $1 million worth of increase in our revenues through the increase in student enrollment. Then item number 9, earlier during the year, we went ahead and changed our delinquent tax attorneys. And in the past history, when you have 2 firms collecting, which we did have 2, for this year we do have 2 firms, there is always an increase in the amount of delinquent taxes. Therefore, remember, for every dollar locally that you generate here or collect here, you get matched at the state level. So taking that into consideration, I think we can experience an additional $1 million. And then finally, last year, the funding formulas were pretty restrictive. We experienced a 5% decrease in our state aid. This year, the second year, is a little bit less. So therefore, when they change the funding formulas, we should see about $1.5 million increase in our state aid.
What is our ADA?
Our ADA right now, as far as the percentage?
Per student. Do you have the total that we get? How much that we get from the state per student?
Approximately $5,000. I mean, yes, $5,000 per student. Right. So when you take all those potential savings, the total cost savings that we come up is $10,165,000. Now that number is going to be important, and we're going to come back to it because as we go through our presentation, I'm going to have to use this number to explain some spreadsheets further on down. So remember, right now, $10,165,000. Now, there is also potential for additional revenue, and I labeled them additional revenue options that we need to talk about, which we've kind of have already had some conversations. For example, the sale of the surplus property. And I know we've talked about, like the Madison properties. We've talked about different properties that the school district own that, we would need to go and evaluate whether those properties are still in the best interest for the district to hold, or is it something that we can either sell or do something of this sort. If you notice, I did not put any dollar amount. That's to indicate that we have not gone out there and determined how much each property is worth, or even made a list of those properties that we would be considering. I would just like to bring it up as part of conversation and then get some input from our board members so that you can say, yes, I think this is a good idea, come back with a list, or no, let's hold off on those items or on that particular item. The other thing, and this is just a conversation starter, the consolidation of small schools. If you look at the cost savings ideas from last year, the consolidation of small schools was there. This year, I think that this is something that we need to start considering. And what I mean by consolidation of small schools, that doesn't necessarily mean just doing away with the property or doing anything of that sort. It's looking to see where our student enrollments are and see how we could absorb some students into other campuses and in the process become more efficient and effective. I know that at a couple of board meetings ago, the Bond Oversight Committee, one of the presenters, I think, was Dr. Garcia, if I'm not mistaken. When he addressed the board, he said, one thing we're recommending for you all to consider is instead of putting money into older campuses that would need a lot of repair, if you could look at using those campuses perhaps for other things, or I think he even used the word the consolidation of small schools. Again, we do not have a dollar amount because this would require for us to actually do some study, get involvement, and get some direction. And
Madam Chair, Ms. Longoria, just for the record, this would be something looking at it long term down the road, because it's not for this fall. I want to make sure everybody understands that come August we're not going to do that, but I think it is an option if the board guides us that way and we spend time to do it correctly as to what schools and how much savings and all of the various variables, but that will come here in the near future.
That's correct, Dr. Montoya. And again, that's why I didn't attach any dollar amounts to it. We're not counting on those savings this year, but I do think that we need to have, at least start the conversation. The other one is item number 3. At various meetings, I think that the last time we talked about this, if I'm not mistaken, was like at the curriculum meeting, restructuring our stipends, using the current stipends that we have out there and maybe turn them around and use them differently, perhaps into like giving stipends for those teachers that can teach like dual enrollment classes, or higher degrees for teachers would, get additional stipends and things of this sort. So this is one area where I think that we can study it, look into it, and come up with some either potential savings, or if not, redirecting those funds the way that we're currently using, and perhaps use them to entice our staff to go out there and get advanced degrees. Then item number 4, I know this is a topic that we hardly like to talk about, but there's also the possibility of increasing the tax rate. Just at the last presentation when we had our financial advisors, they talked about the tax rate. They talked about what they called, I believe they called them either copper pennies or
golden pennies, which you can approve to a point without community approval.
Right, that's correct. And what the copper pennies or the golden pennies, what they do is these are additional revenues that you would get from the state by raising, our tax rate at a higher rate than your normal local, I guess, penny would generate. And then finally, we talked about this. This is something that would require study. And again, this is long-term, is a transportation substation. I know that we've talked about this at one of our facilities committee. I think it's something that's good. If it's good for the district, it would be good for our students. And again, this is just conversation starters and items that we would need to get some direction from the board, not necessarily tonight, but just to have these types of conversations so we can go out there and then come up with well-developed plans as to how we can implement this to continue becoming more efficient and effective. Then finally, tomorrow, if you notice, after tomorrow, there's just notes. And this page is notes for us to take. As you well know, next year is the end of the biennium, which means, the legislature meets in 2 years, they make their determination, and they fund you for, what's going to happen for the next 2 years. So we know what's going to happen for next year, which is what we're building our budget on. But in January, they start meeting already to see how they're going to fund education in the future, and they go 2 years ahead.
Just another added piece of information. There are several major lawsuits that have been filed in the last few months to deal with the education funding issues in Texas, and the judge ruled up in Austin a couple of weeks ago that he's going to consolidate all of those lawsuits, and they will go to court in October. So if that's the case, maybe between October and January, maybe we'll have a little more direction on funding issues in public schools in Texas.
So with that being said, that is the end of my presentation for item 2, which was again titled Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. Are there any questions in this particular part?
Yes, Ms. Peña?
Yes. Go ahead, Mr.
Under potential cost savings, number 6, limit spending to campus ADA and 95% departments. Can you explain that to me? Because I think I missed that part.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Montoya, if I may. This is one of the conversations that we've had in the past is trying to increase student attendance. So what we want to do as an incentive for the campuses, and also the advantages we would save money, is that campuses would be limited in their supply money to spend up to their ADA, their attendance rate. So if a campus attendance rate is at 90%, then they would be eligible to spend up to 90% of their supply money. Those campuses that have 95% or 98%, then they would be allowed to spend up to 95% or 98% of their campus allocations. The departments, we would require all departments to spend up to 95%. In other words, right off the bat, we would have a 5% savings of those box money, for lack of a better word, or operational funds. This would not interfere with the hard costs like paying your electrical bills or any of that thing. This would just be the money that we have for supplies and things of this sort.
Okay, my only concern is, because I've heard it, several times at several campuses, that they do not have enough monies in their budget to buy like something in the library that they need, a bookshelf or something, or something that's needed, some kind of equipment in the library or audiovisual or something, or even teachers having to pay out of their pocket to buy supplies for the students, and I don't know if we can really go by the ADA because there's not enough money. Say, let me just pick any school, Longoria. They only have 300 students. So how much money do they get more or less for that campus?
Dr. Montoya, if I may, once we hit item number 4, I've actually given you a breakdown of their campus allocations, and we can go down each of the campus. And overall, just for and this is just for 211, which is Title I, 212 migrant, 199, which is local maintenance, what we give out, not taking into consideration any grant. Our campuses actually receive approximately $8.6 million just for supply money. So once we get into item number 4, we can go into more detail into that concern that you have brought up.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Now we move on to item number 3, staffing update departments.
Madam Chair, Ms. Longoria, again, this is a discussion that you've heard at least 2 times before, but we're finalizing a direction. Dr. Atkinson, if you'll share some information.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya, members of the board, Mrs. Peña. As Dr. Montoya just mentioned, this is probably going to be now our 3rd time to review this. wanted to point out just a couple areas that we were working on since the last time that we had spoken. If we look at page 2, under the area of the high schools, again, it's clearly outlined. It's one special ed administrator and then one full-time testing coordinator. I know that there was some discussion about whether or not we could do some splits between the middle schools to provide some relief as well, and I think Ms. Longoria, that was one of the areas you asked us to look at.
Excuse me, if you could, I'm going to go ahead and hand over the seat Ms. Presas has asked to take over, so I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm going to change seats.
Sorry for my delay. Go ahead, proceed.
We're on tab number 3. Page 2. Go ahead. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. And I was just making reference to a request that had been made, Ms. Longoria, about the special ed administrators. We did that at the high school level. And in discussing the middle schools, because that was one of the pending requests, Mr. Garcia did work with his special programs department to look at actually assigning an additional counselor to each of the middle schools. So you will have an at-risk counselor projected for each of the middle schools for next year, and that would go towards the instructional value of each of those middle schools. Instead of adding an additional administrator or splitting an administrator, it was discussed that an additional at-risk counselor, which currently we don't have any at the middle school level, but we're projecting for next year to have an additional at-risk counselor for each of the middle schools. And that would help address any of the other issues that we have on that campus with in dealing with counseling services for our students.
Question?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Ms. Garcia.
Go ahead, Ms. Longoria.
You know, when I first heard you mention about the special ed administrator, I was all for and excited, but I'm just thinking, how are we with special ed teachers? Do we have enough special ed teachers?
Go ahead, Dr. Atkinson.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Montoya, members of the board. Ms. Longoria, actually in discussion with Dr. Garcia, Mr. Garcia, and myself and the HR staff met with Dr. Garcia and Mr. Cano, I believe is his name. Yes. And we were looking at staffing projections for next year, and he actually has indicated there will be several at the high school, actually, based on the staffing numbers that they have, that we are actually fully staffed at the elementary and middle school level, and we'll have some excess teachers at the high school level. So we'll actually have some additional teachers that will need to be placed at the end of the school year for the following school year.
Okay, yeah, 'cause I was going to say, well, if we're short of teachers,
no,
let's
not
go
at
with
all.
the teachers
That's
first.
not the case at all. No, ma'am.
What about teacher aides in the special ed area?
That's the same as well. He's actually looking at it right now, and he believes that he's fully staffed and adequately staffed in those areas. Now, one of the other things that we did mention, it's on another page, but the PPCD nurse aides is something that they're also looking at, being able to assign some nurse aides to be split between the different PPCD units at those elementary campuses that have those children, those units at their campuses.
Okay. And Dr. Montoya would like to stress that these special ed administrators are utilized for special ed and not for other areas, because I some time ago, and I was just remembering that we had them before at one time, but they were using them as in other areas. So just make sure that they are used for special ed.
Ms. Longoria, members of the board, I think you stress a very important point that at least 2-3 years ago when they were in place, that's exactly what was happening. And I think this time around, we're going to have to monitor that tightly to make sure that they are assigned to special ed areas versus other areas, right, et cetera. But you have an excellent point, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
now go to campus allocations, item number 4. Dr.
I
Montoya.
don't think she was
Oh,
finished.
did you? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry,
She was
Dr. A.
finished. She's the
Go
one
ahead.
that's saying that.
Yeah, I just
You know?
was so excited on staffing here. Dr. A, go ahead.
Thank you.
It should
Dr.
be the
Montoya.
money that you should get excited for, not the staffing.
Well, here, one of
And
the
not one
items
without
that
the other.
one of the items that Mr. Garcia alluded to in his original presentation was the idea of the dual enrollment teachers. And if you look at page 27, or actually it's a page right after page 5.
It's number 27.
Yes. You'll see that the first 5 items there are in italics, and then we've highlighted dual enrollment teachers, which is what the district and the board has already given the direction to the district. You'd like for us to start promoting at a higher rate. So we are recommending at this point that we look at that for this next school year. The next page, page 28. Department heads, this is something that we had discussed with you previously, that we're going back to look at revamping. Through our HR Principals Advisory Group, we had each of the different grade levels go back and look at specific duties and responsibilities for the different department heads, and making sure that they were appropriate to those areas, especially giving special attention to our core areas. Our alternative schools, right now, instead of lumping them with the high school, because their departments are a lot smaller than our regular comprehensive high schools, we have actually gone through and made them very similar to what we have for our elementary schools, which is 2 to 4 teachers per grade level, 5 to 7 teachers per grade level, and 8+ per grade level. As well as the middle schools, we're looking at increasing those stipends at the middle school level. We have all of our middle schools committed to our STEM project. They are going to be part of the Infinity Project through SMU in Dallas. I like to say that one more time, through SMU in Dallas. Oh. So, but it's really a wonderful program, and they have really embraced it. I have to say about the Mustangs, since we hear about the Aggies all the time. But in any case, really our 11 middle schools have really taken this charge very seriously. And I think it's indicative of the direction by the board and the superintendent that we embrace this. And that means that we also need to make sure that we look at being able to compensate them at a higher level, since we are definitely working towards a higher level of output at each of those campuses. The page 38. These 2 next new pages will be new. It was definitely discussed by Mr. Garcia and the Special Programs Department that it's important that we clearly outline some of the additional supplemental support that the campuses receive. As the board requested and Dr. Montoya has indicated is important for us to maintain for next year. Having a full day of pre-K is costly for the district, but it's a commitment by the board and by the superintendent to continue, so that you know that our supplemental funds pay for half of a pre-K teacher, the other half is locally funded. Okay? When we look at the state comp teachers that we have at the middle school and the high school, and also our alternative schools, it's important for us to be able to standardize those allocations to the campuses. A lot of times we do hear from principals in the past that it has been a little subjective when they've allocated positions. We've really moved towards this year simply relying on the formulas that are here, so that everybody's treated equitably and fairly. You know exactly what you're getting based on your enrollment. One of the things that you notice on the state comp at-risk counselor side, that's your middle school. It's never been there before, but each middle school will now get an at-risk counselor for next year. And that is a serious commitment by Dr. Montoya and administration to make sure they get that additional help. Of course, the alternative education program teacher at the back, we have a 15-to-1 student ratio, which is what our state requires. And then alternative education programs are Brownsville Learning Academy and our Lincoln Park. We'll also have an 18-to-1 ratio. If we look at the next page, page 39, in terms of the aides, and I know that we had mentioned it earlier, about special ed, but know that our Title I aides, our pre-K and our kindergarten aides are 1-to-1 in terms of our early childhood and our 3-year-old program. There's a 1-to-1 teacher ratio for our pre-K. And kinder, it's a 50-to-1 pre-K kinder, so they're shared. And then our general instructional aid, it's a 400-to-1, which is basically what we have right now. When we start talking about our librarian aides, they all, based on our last report, each of our elementaries will have a library aide. Some of them were getting 0.5s. And I believe Dr. Montoya, his direction to us was try to eliminate as much as possible the 0.5s. If they are closer to getting 1, let's give them the 1. It's very difficult to hire for 0.5s or splits, and so this is something that he's supported us with, and we're trying to make that happen for us for next year. Of course, in the last one, our parent liaisons are definitely one assigned to each of the schools, which I think continues to be important. So those are all the significant pages dealing with the campus allocations. I don't know if there are any questions. It's pretty much the same thing. We had a few tweaking there, but I think we highlighted the majority of those.
Go ahead, Ms. Longoria.
Dr. Montoya, I was just wondering if it would be a good idea for either you or Dr. Atkinson to just elaborate a little bit more on the supplemental duty pay. Explain why these individuals will get a supplemental duty pay, just in case there's someone in the audience and the public that don't know what that's that pay is for.
Go ahead, Dr. Atkinson.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya. It's a great point, Mrs. Longoria. One of the things that we look at in terms of our local allocations, we're allowed through our state and federal allocations to supplement our local effort. And so as we have a teacher, a first to fifth grade teacher, the state allows us to use our funds for pre-K and K in order to help reduce the student-teacher ratios at those areas. When we start talking about our counselors, we have a counselor ratio of 500-to-1 through our state comp funds. Through any other federal funds, we're also looking at being able to reduce that ratio to closer to 400-to-1. And I know that when we start talking about stipends, the $20 stipend or the $12 stipend, that would come at our next budget meeting. Mr. Garcia has asked us to go ahead and present the entire compensation plan to you all at that point. So then we'll start talking about the actual stipends, which the recommendation is that we keep them consistent to this year's. But in terms of the funds that are used through state comp or through federal programs, those are all supplementing our local effort. And I don't know if that's okay, or would you like me to expand on anything in particular?
Yes, and how do these employees qualify for the supplemental pay?
Go ahead, Dr. Atkinson.
Thank you. Dr. Montoya, I think what we're talking about is in terms of the stipends that they would qualify for in terms of if they are in a certified area, if you're a teacher, if you're in an actual program, an after-school program or a before-school program or a Saturday academy. It'd have to do with we would be looking at them applying for those certain programs so that they could become, if they're eligible, they can be considered, and then they would work those other programs. But we have a basic list of prerequisites that they would have to meet, and then they would get considered.
Like if they have a composite in social studies or
yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Science or chemistry?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We now go to item number 4, campus allocations. Dr. Montoya.
Again, this is an area that has been looked at over a period of several weeks, a couple of months. We have shared a little bit of that information for you, but at this time, we'll go ahead and Dr. Atkinson on number 4, if you'll. I'm sorry, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya. As mentioned earlier on section or item number 4, that's just a snapshot of the money that campuses are receiving from what I call the major funding sources, which is your 211, which is your Title I, and then your 166, which is your special education, 212, which is migrant, and 199, which is the money that we give them. We, just for, which is local, just for a lack of a better word, We call this box money because they're able to, buy boxes and supplies and things of this sort. It has nothing to do with your personnel costs at the campuses. So this is the supply money that they receive. And if you notice, we broke it down from the high schools, middle schools, and elementaries. These allocations do not include, like for example, in the high schools, all the tips grant money that they're getting. This is just coming from these allocations here. So when you look at the whole spreadsheet, which entails 2 pages, at the very end, out of these funding sources for quote-unquote box money, campuses are receiving $8.6 million. So now let's talk about for example, the campus that Ms. Longoria mentioned. Well, let's look at Longoria. I believe that was the campus that you. So it's in the first page. If you go to the very bottom, which is location campus 103 Longoria. So Longoria receives $58,164 from Title I, 390 from migrant because it's based on the number of migrant students that they have there. 255, which is our TPTR. They don't receive any supply money, but campuses 600 plus receive a teacher for class size reduction, but it's not included here because we're only dealing with supply money. On state comp, which is 162, they receive $9,400. Then on special ed, based again on numbers, they receive $1,560. And then local maintenance, they receive $15,525. So when you combine all those numbers together, they receive they would be working with about $85,000 worth of money, $85,000 in allocation to run their program. So now going back to one of the ideas that was presented on the cost savings, let me go back to that one, which would be number 6, limiting spending to campus ADA. And I do not have what the ADA for Longoria is, but it's one of our elementaries, and most of our elementaries run a high ADA, anywhere from 95 to 98% every daily attendance. So for conversation purposes here, I will use 95%. So I would take $85,000 times 95, so they would be able to spend up to $80,787. So that's how that would work. Now, if their attendance rate is 98, of course, they would get to spend more. Let's say that their attendance was at 90%, then they would be able to spend $76,535. Now, again, the purpose of this is really to try to give them an incentive to go out there and again, for lack of a better word, hustle in getting their students in class so that we can have the attendance counting. Every student that comes to class generates additional state revenue, which would give us more money to work with.
Yeah, but I'd like to say this, that there are certain areas that you just don't have children anymore. They're more of the adult in that section, in that part of the community. It's unfortunate, but you have a lot of your older families without any children. That's why probably it's very minimum. The numbers are very low there. Because I've sold properties in the area, and the majority of the people are just people that their children are already gone, and they're alone there. They're moved away, and they don't bring back any of their grandchildren either. So, I mean, even if they were to hustle and go out there, there's really not enough in the radius of that section of that, demographics, because demographics means a lot. If you start seeing, like, let's say on Adams, Elizabeth Street, Washington Street, you have very minimal.
If I may, Ms. Presas, well, are we talking more of the kids that enroll at the beginning of the year? You're going to get a certain amount of money. So you're talking about encouraging the enrollment that you have, that they attend school. Not so much go out and add to your enrollment, but the ones that are enrolled, you get a certain percent for supplies. So now you are encouraging the principal to get 100% of their supply money. You encourage the enrollment of the people already enrolled in that school. So you encourage attendance of the enrolled students. Is this what we're talking about?
Dr. Montoya, yes, that is correct. The ADA means taking the enrollment that already exists and then encouraging them
attendance
to come to school.
To attend,
Right,
to
which
attend
is
school.
something that has
Encourage
been
in attendance.
communicated to us by the board, come up with ideas as to how you can get more of the actual students that are registered to start coming
Make sure they
to
show
And what's the population there? Besides, I know that where we're heading towards, I know that that's a point that we're trying to make, and that's everywhere throughout the district. You have to encourage our students to attend school because we're losing daily attendance, money. So,
Madam
what's
Chair,
the number of
just a
students?
quick question that might help. What do we lose per student that doesn't come to class for a day, approximately? What does it cost us
5,000?
per student?
An actual number.
Let me do some quick math here.
We get 4,000 some per student, 5,000
5,000. We lose approximately $30 a day.
a day.
And how much have we lost overall? I don't know if you have this piece of information, but let's say as of now, approximately total that we've lost because of attendance issues.
I don't have that number with me, but it would be $30 a day times whatever.
The number of students that have not been going.
It does become substantial once you look at the whole picture. Remember, we have approximately in excess of 49,000 students registered in our school district. So
Thank you.
And what's the number there in that campus?
I don't have that number with me.
What is it, like below 300?
It's about, I want to say, like 348, 350, between 350. Right?
So they don't have a lot of numbers, so the encouragement should be whatever you have, get them to attend school, period. That's the focus. Go ahead, Chris.
Dr. Montoya, Mr. Garcia, I know you work your campus budgets according to the projected enrollments. Okay, so say Longoria again or PUNET have at the beginning of the year, they project they're going to have 300 or 350, and then it turns out they get more, they get another 100. Well, what happens then? Do you adjust your budget?
Go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
Yes, our practice has been that we look at it at midpoint, and then we do an adjustment at that point. If it's up, we can give them some additional money. If it's lower, we hardly ever go back and cut any of the money that we issue out.
Yeah, because, and I know you have to go by the enrollment and projected enrollment. However, all these campuses have the same needs. They need equipment for library, like I said, or science labs and all that. So, how can we work that where the teacher or the administrator does not have to pay out of their pocket to buy the supplies that they need for the students?
I think, Mr. Garcia, members of the board, one of the things I believe we have done, and you can correct me, Mr. Garcia, is if a principal was low on an area and they could justify, we did go into some line codes there to assist them. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Remember, Dr. Montoya, one of your initiatives that you had wanted us to continue has been the mini grants, and we've come back to the board and said, okay, we want to get money from fund balance, from state compensatory, to come and do some mini grants for them to go out there and have more supply money. Now, here's another thing, and I've heard those conversations, but when I look at the actual budget allocations, I haven't seen a campus that does not have any budget money supply money that, one, we have not been able to assist, or two, that actually do not have any money. I think that what we need to do is work closer with our AAs, work closer with our principals, so that they can see the entire picture and utilize their money. I'll give you a good example. Recently, I believe it was last week, and Ms. Lopez can attest to what I'm going to say. I received a phone call and an email saying, could you please help us out, here we go, with toilet paper, because we don't have any more money for toilet paper. There's still plenty of days to go to school. And before I said, yes, let's go ahead and just allocate you more money, I went ahead and ran their 199 budget. And in there was still approximately, $2,000 to $2,500 available, that all we needed to do was a budget
Do the budget change.
Budget change.
They don't.
And we helped them with the budget change. And they were able to continue with what they need. But see, at that point, the campus was thinking that they didn't have any more money and they were going to run out of, of the necessary supplies. When in reality, they did have the money. It was just a matter of going back, reviewing the budget, finding out where those pockets were, and doing a budget.
Transferring money, yeah.
They still get the monthly report? Do the campuses still get that monthly report of their accounts with their balance expenditure report? Or maybe if we can do that through the AAs to make sure that they get them to their campuses, that they understand that they have this availability, and then just to have to do the budget changes as needed if they have the availability of the money there.
Right. The other, Dr. Montoya, if I may.
Go ahead.
One of the things that campuses have access to now is the BITEC, which automatically they can get into the computer system and they can pull their balance. They can see their balance as soon as they put in a purchase order. Now, in the past, we used to send out expenditure reports because it was harder for them to keep tabs of, we used to do them with paper purchase orders by the time they get posted. But now with the way we have our system set up and everybody has access to them, at any time, they could just go in there
Yes.
and pull their balances out.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll-
Well, it's easier for them now because I used to have to wait until I got the report.
Right. So that's the presentation on item number 4. Again, this does not include, remember, especially in the high schools, their tips money. Most of those high schools receive an additional $2 million. Those are not included here. This is just our main funding sources. So again, going back to limiting them to their ADA, I think that it would be a good thing. We would closely monitor the campuses, work with their AAs, work with their principals, and of course, if there was some campuses that really needed the additional funding, I know we're going to be there for them.
Thank you.
I have another question on the the students that we provide special services for. We're still getting compensated for that from those districts?
Mr. Garcia?
Are those the ones that?
Dr. Montoya, if you're referring to the school of the deaf.
Yes,
Right.
yes, regional school,
Regional
yes.
School of the Deaf, right. Yes, we do. I think there is some MOU agreement. I'm not familiar exactly with how much we're charging the participating school districts, but I know that, for example, Los Fresnos, Raymondville, I've seen other school buses coming in, and yes, we do send them a statement for them to participate in that school.
Now move along to item number 5, funding options for safety and security needs.
Right.
Let me just make a comment very quickly. Madam Chair, members of the board, this is kind of an area that has surfaced over the last couple of years. We've obviously been looking at the instructional side very heavy, the staffing side very heavy, the compensation side, but some of these safety and security needs have arisen literally in the last couple of years so that we can make sure our schools are safe, so that other items such as instruction can occur. But in order to do that, we're going to have to visit with the board some areas to improve some safety-related issues. But go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya. What I'm about to present is not new. We've discussed this in different settings, in previous budget meetings. I think we even discussed it in a facilities meeting. What's new to this proposal is how we're proposing to fund this initiative. Now, again, this is conversation. It is a proposal. It's for input from the board. Nothing is set in stone. And I'm putting that disclaimer because I'm going to take you eventually to an agenda item, but it says sample and draft, and I just want to get input. We talked about security needs district-wide. We've talked about transportation needs. We talked about radios and GPSs. And we've also talked about the actual need of school buses. When you put all those three components together, you're talking about approximately $5 million worth of expenditures or what I would say worth of investments that we really need to do in order to be up to date in all those areas. My proposal would be, out of the $5 million, to go ahead and budget for $1.5 million, just straight budget for next year through our budgeting process. So that would leave $3.5 million worth of initiatives and finding money for it. So as we go along, the first one is the police and security services, and it gives you just a summary as to how the money would break out and how much they would be needing, about $1.6 to $1.7 million, which this has been presented before. Then you would go into the transportation needs. This is for the radios and the GPSs, and you, at the end, they need approximately $1.1 million, and of course the 1.5 for transportation. Here's the new part to it, and this is where I would want to get some direction. In the past, when we built the Palo Alto structure or annex building, we borrowed money from ourselves. We went ahead, took some money. I think that the original resolution was like for 12.5. We wound up using actually 9 to 9.5. So we returned some money back into one of our funds, and that fund was the one for the workers' compensation fund. The proposal that we have here would be to go ahead and ask for a loan from ourselves. This would be a 0% interest loan. It would be through a resolution that would force future administrations, future boards to pay that money back that we're borrowing from ourselves. So in there, would be the sample agenda, and it is very similar to the one we used before, where we would be going and would say, you know, administration recommends adopting a resolution authorizing the district to borrow funds from the self-funded workers' compensation fund balance. This is the money that we set aside in case of if there's, you know, any worker compensation issues. For the purpose of purchasing safety and security equipment, we would be borrowing $3.5 million from ourselves. Then the actual resolution, if you notice, it says that right now that current balance is approximately $15 million. That's how much we have, approximately $15 million on this workers' compensation account. Now I did the research, and we can come back with the hard numbers. We use approximately $1.5 million each year to pay for workers' compensation insurance. That would mean that we're good to go for another 10 years, assuming that everything would stay the same. So we would borrow $3.5 million from the fund, of course at 0% interest because it's our own money, and then pay it back, if you notice on Part D, on an annual basis, pay it back to the self-funded worker compensation fund at $875,000 each year. In other words, I want to pay it back in 5 years because we have 10. We would pay it back in 5 years. Now, it also says two things. If it would allow us for an accelerated payback if administration determines that funds are available. Once we set the budget, once we see all these cost cuttings, and if based on enrollments and things of this sort, if there's money, we could accelerate the payment back, perhaps, you know, $1 million or $2 million at the end of each year, and pay it all back sooner than the 5 years. And also it has the safety, and here is, again, we have to be straight up. In case of a catastrophic workers' compensation claim, in other words, the whole fund gets wiped out, then we would, at that time, go into fund balance, which we're trying not to go at all, and transfer the 3.5. In other words, take the fund balance, pay our own loan back into the self-funded workers' compensation fund. Again, this would require board action. It would require a resolution, and everything would be set up. It's like, you know, it would be like actually taking out a loan out at the bank. We would have to pay it back. The difference is it's our own money, and it would be at 0% interest. And that would give us the opportunity to be able to take care of these needs that have been, for whatever reason, through budgetary purpose, neglected or not addressed previously, and take care of them, bring them all up to date right now.
With this in mind, you know, that I think what we need to do is make sure that the equipment that's going to be sold to us is going to be compatible in case there's any, you know, technology changes, because I notice here that it says replacement and it's already obsolete, or the system needs to be replaced because that system is already obsolete. I'm sure this equipment is quite old, but can we just make sure that we don't go through the same problem that we're having with the BITech, because BITech, it's been a headache for us, and we've been pumping in money, and obviously we're not getting anywhere. And I don't think we're getting anywhere with that one. Let's hope it's for the better, but I think that's one thing that we need to focus on. I know that we need to focus on the safety equipment and also for transportation, since I've heard from other districts that through the GPS system, it's a better monitoring system, and they have saved a lot of money in other districts once that this system goes into place. They've seen from 1.5 million to 2 million in savings just by monitoring through the GPS system.
I think, Madam Chair, members of the board, your point is well taken. We know that technology very rapidly changes because that's the nature of the companies and the technology, but we would be very cognizant of that fact that as we negotiate with companies that these items would hopefully last obviously several years, and you know, the updates would not as costly in the future. So your point is well taken.
Go ahead, Ms. Longoria.
Dr. Montoya and Mr. Garcia, have the payments been made to the previous loan that we got from the workers' comp? They are being made.
Go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, we started paying 2 years ago. I think right now we pay back at the end. I believe the payment comes due in June. It's close to $600,000, but we have been paying. Originally, the board authorized approximately $13 million to be taken out of the fund. We wound up using about 10, so right off the bat, we put $3 million back in. So we're not going, plus the 2 years that we have paid into it, we're not going stretching out too much further than what we've already been there.
Okay.
Don't bite more than you.
Okay.
Ms. Presas?
Go ahead, Ms. Peña.
So then the part of the resolution would be like $875,000 back a year that you paid back in 4 years.
Right,
We'll be
4
done
years,
with it.
and the first year of the $1.5 million that
Right.
we're kicking in.
And okay, and then I noticed also when we have what expenditures like on number 5, transportation department. Have you gotten to that yet, or is that coming up?
That's where we're at.
Because I noticed that we have Motorola Solutions, and there's a total. Is this what we expect will cost us to get the transportation up to par?
Yes, ma'am. We have actually, with transportation and the Motorola company and our police department, have had several meetings, and this would put everything current up to par, because again, one of the issues that we've shared in the past is that the new communication system is going 100% digital in December, so everything we have is going to be obsolete in a few months. So this will make it updated and current and safe and everything.
So then we already put it out to bid. Is what because I know you have a sales contact person here.
No, what it is it's through the purchasing office, the process that allows us to look at vendors that are on, just to see what the cost would be. Yeah, and this is really at a reduced price. We're getting.
But we're allowed to pick. Is that what you're doing? You pick someone that's on that list. Is this why we have the sales contact person listed on here already?
Yes. It's more. Nothing's been negotiated. Obviously, this is our one of our primary contacts that's on the list of vendors through Region 1 for the region for radios. So that's part of the process.
They do a lot of service to all the districts.
That's
okay.
correct.
So, and that's what I'm saying. We can get on a list and somebody in the area, and we can go to that person in the area.
And they would be close by.
People.
Yeah.
Aren't they local people?
Yeah, they're.
Yes.
Yeah.
You don't want somebody from out of city that's going to charge us for the traveling.
And this is a quote only.
Yes.
Yeah, it's only it's basically to go base ourselves by what would the cost be. I mean, you can't just throw a number and then it's going to be more, or
That's
it's going to be
correct.
less. Okay, so we move along to item number 6, stamp budget amendment.
Madam Chair, members of the board, as you're very well aware, we're opening our new program, a premier program at Veterans. We have had a lot of interest in the community, a lot of interest among students. So I truly think the startup process is going to be very effective. But obviously, by doing that, we're going to have to look at the budget issue. And we have shared a little bit of information in the past, but now we're starting to get more specific. So, Mr. Garcia, if you'll share.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya. Again, this is a continuation. I went back and in February, and I have my booklet here, at the February Budget Committee meeting, we presented what we were calling the STEMP budget. And at that time, the budget request was $1.8 million. The actual number is $1,822,195. We talked about funding it from as many funding sources as we could and try not to come back and ask for money from fund balance. Unfortunately, we put all our money together. It was $318,118 from our vocational. We used some leftover startup money to the tune of $600,000, and then an additional $150,000 from existing FTEs that are out there that we would be using to implement the STEM project. Once we pull all that money, we're still short $754,077, and this is what this budget amendment would be. It would be, and it's actually in the agenda for May 1st. I wanted to bring it up here so we could discuss it. That way, at the actual budget meeting, we could see what this money was for and how we came up with the amount. So again, taking the original request of $1.8 million and then putting everything that we've already had monies for, we would need $754,077. Now, this would be an actual amendment coming from fund balance. So we would be hitting our fund balance. Again, based on the preliminary numbers that I'm seeing for this year, I think that at the end of the school year, we would have enough money to offset this hit that we're going to take into the fund balance.
Now, Mr. Garcia, is this a one-time deal to buy what's needed to make sure that program is effectively put in place and runs?
That's a very good question, Dr. Montoya. Yes, the other thing that I had mentioned in a previous conversation was trying to hold off, not going to fund balance, and actually budget it from next year's budget. Unfortunately, due to timing of processing orders and getting equipment and setting up a high-quality program, we're not able to wait until July 1st. So that's why we're coming back. Yes, it would be, Dr. Montoya, a one-time shot, and once we would get it done, that would be it. Now, again, I do feel that at the end of the school year, with the way the finances are looking right now, we would be able to offset this investment.
Go ahead, Ms. Longoria.
Dr. Montoya, Mr. Garcia, can you tell us more or less how much we have in our fund balance right now?
Go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
Yes, Dr. Montoya, remember that at the end of last year, our fund balance was at approximately 60 million. This is the undesignated, approximately 60,100,000. I do not have the exact figure right now. If you were to ask me, well, what do you anticipate it to end next year without taking this out, I anticipate for it to be growing about $1 million, maybe $1.2 million. So you would be looking at 61 to 61 and a half.
Okay, all right, thank you.
That we're building it up?
Little by little, it looks, at this preliminary stages, it looks like, yes, it would be an increase into the fund balance.
Okay. Well, we got to try to do something. Okay. We now go to tab number 7, TASB salary proposal.
Madam Chair, members of the board, again, this was a formal presentation that was presented to you by the TASB representative at a prior meeting, and again, we come to you with the third round of sharing information and opening up, obviously, for any questions or concerns you may have. Dr. Atkinson, if you want to make some comments.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya, members of the board. At this time, really, we just wanted to get more, at this point, I guess, a feel from the board as to what direction. I know Mr. Garcia's question to Dr. Montoya and myself has been, if we look at Proposal 1, then we have to look at, reconfiguring our budget proposal one way. If we look at Proposal 2, which is on the higher end, then we have to look at, again, making adjustments, to our budget proposal differently. So at this point, we're really, I know that Dr. Dane was not going to be coming down for a committee meeting, but he will be down for the budget meeting or the actual called meeting where you would actually be considering this for formal adoption. So he'll be here to answer any of the technical questions. But for us to be able to proceed with trying to finalize, or at least near finalizing the budget, we needed to get a little bit more of an idea of what direction you want us to head into. The proposal 1 or proposal 2, and I think that's Dr. Montoya can attest that we're trying at this point. Mr. Garcia has already indicated we're shooting for the first meeting in June to be done with the budget entirely, which is I think definitely a testament to the good direction we've been receiving from the board and the amount of teamwork that has been nurtured over the last few months, especially to make sure we can get to this point. So we're probably going to be about a month early, which is excellent for this district to look at being able to push through a balanced budget again with the possibility of providing some additional compensation. So, but I know Dr. Montoya has asked us to kind of hold off going to either direction until he's sure about the direction of the board. So that's where we are right now.
Go ahead, Ms. Peña.
And I know we look at some of this proposal where it says a cost increase, and I know we're really tight on money, and we're looking at pulling money out, like for the STEM program and things that we need to balance because they need to get off the ground for the students. So I know that it's we're in a really tight spot, and to make any changes that would increase anything at all at this point, I don't know how secure we would be, because once you increase anything, that goes into your fund balance to pay these pay increases. Where would that put us? How would it be if we could just stay, status quo as we are now until we have a more solid foundation that we know we're going to get more monies coming in, and we are in a position where we can make changes that will increase some of these pays. And I know it's really difficult for a lot of our teachers and for a lot of our administrators, but it makes it really difficult to try and increase some when we're looking at cutting others off, and those that make less money. And I know it's difficult. It's a difficult position for me to stand in, but I'd like to see us minimize any increases at all, so we don't affect our actual budget next year to where 3-4 years down the line it might be a little bit of a problem for us.
Again, this would be obviously a joint board decision to give us a direction, but Mr. Garcia, I think you wanted to make a couple of comments.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Montoya, Madam Chair. To address that concern, when I presented on tab 1, I said we're going to use this number, the 10,165,000, and I'm going to tie it to part of the presentation under tab number 7, and here's where it ties up. First of all, these proposals would not be coming from fund balance. This would be changes that would occur that would need to be substantiated from this point on, which that's why we're not using any fund balance.
Something that we can guarantee we're going to get.
Right. And we come up, let's talk about the two proposals. The first proposal is approximately cost is $7.3 million. That would entail more or less a pay increase for teachers of about $1,115, and then about a 2% for everyone else. Now, through board conversations and different input from different parties, we said, well, we really don't want to just give across the board a 2%. We need to take care of our manual trades, of our bus drivers, of all our individuals. We would like to see something more for them. So then if you flip to page 32, 32 is an attempt to address that issue. In other words, stagger the amount of a pay increase. Under proposal option number 2, our teachers would get $1,600. Then it would be staggered, where you would have, our non-exempt manual trades, and you're getting approximately 4.3% pay increase, and then professional support staff getting, non-exempt instructional support staff getting 3.8, and then our professional support staff getting approximately a 2%. So if you want to, label it, it would be like a 2, 3, 4,
Okay.
The 2, 3, 4 plan, or things of this sort. Now, what I'm trying to show is that going back to tab 1, not going into fund balance, implementing additional cost savings ideas. That's why
This
we went
would
out.
cover
Yeah,
that.
That's why we went into continue with the resignation incentive, working on our staffing ratios, trying to increase our student attendance and all these things. That would give us the amount of money necessary
Okay.
to support this.
Okay, and then I'm glad you pointed out, because in that sense, then we would be able to do it without a problem. And that way, we would be safeguarded.
That's
And
correct.
I'm all for that. The only thing that I would ask is, because it's real easy to propose something on paper, and then sometimes we start off real strong, and it kind of goes by the wayside. And all of these ideas that you have here on tab 1 are excellent. But we need to make sure that we get on it quickly. Like, for example, getting the advertising, getting someone to get on it, to get it in as quickly as we can, because it's there for the taking. So these are excellent ideas. My only concern is making sure that we push hard on it so we can get it to that point, to where we bring that money in, and then we all will be okay.
Dr. Montoya, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
And what Dr. Montoya really wanted for us to do was to give you all options and say, okay, here are your options. We can do this, we can do that. Working together, this is how we can make it happen. We've gone out there again and looked at all the potential savings and say, if we all work together and this is the direction that the board wants to go in, we can support up to this amount.
We have a low and a high.
Right.
Go ahead, Ms. Longoria.
Yeah, I was reviewing these 2 pages. Manual trades, that's our maintenance workers, right? And our bus drivers. Dr. Montoya or Mr. Garcia? Or?
Yes.
Yes, that's
Okay. What about our clerical staff, like secretaries, clerks, receptionists? Where did they fall under?
They fall under, I'm sorry, Dr. Montoya, Madam Chair, and there's nobody. There would be our non-exempt administrative support. So it would be, we notice on the side, approximately a 4%.
Yeah, because I was going to ask not to forget them. They have been
make sure we-
overlooked for the past several years. So please be sure you take care of those employees
Bring
as
them
well.
up.
Right, and it would be a 4%. If you notice, it gives you the individuals, the number of employees that are involved, and then how much it will cost at each of those levels, and that's how they come up. The first amount is the $9,000,001, and then Dr. Dane also mentioned that that there needed to be some adjustments. That would be an additional $1 million, and that would put us. That's how you get to the $10.1 million.
On the adjustments.
Right.
For the ones
Once you put
that-
it all together, to make sure that the whole compensation plan now works and is compatible. I think you bring it up to like 95% to market, without going into the numbers.
Instead of being below market.
Right. That's going to cost $10,164,000. Now on proposal 1, which is the low end, to do something like that, still do something for employees, still do something for teachers. That's 7.3. So you have a range there, and we would like direction.
7 million difference. Okay, so we're getting two different proposals here to decide and see what option 1 and option 2, and see which direction we can head.
That is correct. And again, as a board, you would guide us in the next few weeks so that we would come to you with the final proposal. Obviously we'd like to go to the proposal 2, which is the higher one, but the reality is we'll go from there as to what the board elects us to do.
Also, since we're going into miscellaneous, I'd like to take us back to item number 2.
Can I ask a question on this one before we move on, please?
On which one?
On what we're discussing right now, the proposals.
Go ahead, Ms. Peña.
Just real quick, on both pages 31 and 32, you have the total employees affected, and then the total employees, and then employees affected, and the number is different by 21. is there a difference why there's a total employee amount and then the affected is less? Is it because some are already at that point, or why is that the reason? There's a difference of about
The auxiliary
21.
154 and versus 127.
Yeah, and total employee affected, and then, like for example, professional support, total employees is 252, but only 250 will be affected. So the number is different there because I want to make sure I know why.
Mr. Garcia.
Yes, Dr. Montoya, you hit it on
On the nail.
Part of on part of your own question is because, for example, 2 would be already maxed out and.
Okay. Thank you. That answers my question. Thank you. I want to make sure I was thinking right.
Okay, Mr. Garcia. I have a question because some of my colleagues or one of my colleagues questioned about our fund balance, and yes, we know that. I guess if you can bring us back to memory lane, we were not where we should have been because of the expenditures that we had 2-3 years ago. Am I correct?
Mr. Garcia, go ahead, sir.
Yes, Dr. Montoya, we had been experiencing decreases into our fund balance in previous years.
Okay, and first of all, I'd like to commend the administration because I think that if we go back to, and I'm noticing that a year ago when this team came on board and the new team of board members as well, we were pretty aggressive in trying to make sure that, one, we didn't let go of anybody. Am I correct? And the proposal back then was to let go of how many employees were we supposed to let go?
If you
300 and some?
Go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
Yes, if you go back to what I labeled as yesterday, and you go to item number 34, it was approximately 234 FTEs.
Mr. Long, you might want to take a note of this because I'd like for the public to know exactly what this administration has done, and we need to really inform them that we've done really well. So if you go back to another item also, I'm not done yet, Mr. Long. I'll give you the floor when I'm done. Also, on the budget, we were supposed to let go of 300 people or that figure. This time, we're not even proposing that. Am I correct? There's no proposal of letting go of any staff.
No, ma'am.
And then we had cut days also in staff. Am I correct?
Go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
There were, again, if you go back, there were proposals to do some furloughing and reducing days and things of this sort. Yes, but at the end that did not happen. And then also, if you notice on the potential savings, and if you compare it to previous ones, it's not. What I think it's not as heavy on the instructional side as before.
And I'd like to commend the staff, really, Dr. Montoya, because I think that you guys have worked very hard with the board itself, with the right direction. We were at a meeting, and we heard that one of the districts in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, $53 million in the deficit. $53 million.
Smaller district
in the deficit.
In this district.
It was a lot smaller district. We were shocked. And at that point, I stood up and I shared our experiences too as well. We were at, we were running a deficit balance. Am I correct? When you came on board, what was our deficit figure?
Go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
Yes, actually, the proposals were to address not only the revenue shortfall, but also pre-existing deficits in the budgetary process.
Well, I kind of gave them a little bit of hope. I told them to sit tight and maybe they would come out of the $53 million deficit soon. But anyway, I noticed that the defensive offensive coordinators, I have a question on that one. Those coaches are not in a classroom? Because that was a question that was brought up before, and I was just wanting to make sure that we have
Dr. Atkinson,
clarification.
if you'll clarify that.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Montoya, members of the board. Mrs. Garcia, no, neither the offensive or the defensive coordinators are actually teachers of record.
Okay, that was brought up to my attention as well. I mean, and it's this item has been brought up year after year because apparently there's other coaches that do have to be in a classroom, and So we have 2 per high school then.
That is correct, ma'am.
Okay. Overall, I'd like to congratulate again Mr. Garcia and the staff, Dr. Atkinson, Dr. Montoya, because, you know, after listening to what other districts are still having to go through, it made us feel better that we had a staff that had the knowledge of the direction that we had to take and make sure that we didn't continue to dip into the fund balance. And on another note, after you reviewed with Ms. Peña here that the proposals, how it would be worked out, as long as we stay focused on the items that we're going to try to make sure that we can implement, I think that if we get the right people to work on it, I think it will get done. I firmly believe that it will get done. Obviously, you got the early resignation incentive that we started months back, the advertising that we had all been sharing. So, I'd like to thank you for all the hard work and my colleagues for supporting the items that you guys bring to us. But then again, it's been a team effort. Thank you so very much.
Madam Chair, I think Mr. Garcia, you had another comment.
Yes, just one more comment. I know that when we were going through the budget process last year, one of the comments was, magic. It has not been magic. It's been a lot of hard work from the direction from the board and the superintendent, and also from all our staff. I mean, we were at a staff meeting, and I was seeing all our administrators, and I could point to every single one and how hard each single one has, contribute to making this whole budget process and this district successful. And I think that's one of the strengths of BISD. When the going gets tough, we all band together and we work together, and that's how we've been able to do this. So it's been a lot of hard work. It's been through the direction of our superintendent and of course our board, but also all our staff has really worked hard to try to make this happen, and this is why we're here.
Yeah, and then on another note, I noticed that we're moving pretty quickly with the safety, the security, the transportation. But, let us not forget, Dr. Montoya, and I think Ms. Longoria was there too. We were out of town. But there's districts that are also focusing on the technology. And I'm going to try to put a meeting for technology, and hopefully our administration can invite our principals as well. I mean, it's amazing what some of the districts are doing with 100% technology in the classrooms, and I mean, the children are learning at a much faster pace. They showed an elementary school, I think it was somewhere in Arizona or Phoenix, but the schools have gone 100%, technology. Even the teachers, their boards, I mean, everything. Pens that they're using is technology. So I know it's going to be pretty expensive, but that's the reason why we have to, keep the priorities and the focus into place.
And again, Madam Chair, members of the board, I think as we progress in the future and stabilize the budget, I think that could be another major goal, working with curriculum and instruction, because that's really where it has to be, in the classroom and supporting that process. So I think the point is well taken that in the future that'll be a direction that we can kind of move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya.
Mr. Garcia, did you want to talk about the mileage reimbursement? Because I noticed some of the board members got
That's under number 8.
Number 8.
Okay.
We are on number 8.
Miscellaneous on item number 8. We're now with miscellaneous.
Very good. Yeah.
We're now with miscellaneous.
Under item number 8, miscellaneous, I think that one of the questions that was asked to be included was the mileage reimbursement. I have provided you with the board policy, which is DEE local and legal, DEE legal, and also our in-district travel procedures. And basically, to summarize it, is that every employee, right here on the first page under the in-district travel procedure, it says the Brownsville Independent School District will reimburse its employees for mileage incurred to conduct school business within the district boundaries while using a privately owned vehicle. And with that being said, I went and looked. There is no exclusion as to who can claim in-district mileage. Perhaps that's one of the areas that we need to visit. I did run a total, we spent approximately $220,000 last year in in-district, yes, $220,000 in in-district travel. But at this particular point, it's not restricted to a specific group. It's any employee who uses its private vehicle, and we're reimbursing at, right now, we're reimbursing at 45 cents per mile.
So these are employees, oh, Dr. Montoya. These are employees that are, district employees that are traveling and they're getting reimbursed?
That, Dr. Montoya, yes.
Go ahead, Mr.
Yes, that is correct. These are within district, yes.
Yes.
I know that some of them are the ones that do home visits, and then others are secretaries, principals, or who are the?
Okay.
Is there a group or a certain category, or
Mr. Garcia?
Or is it just open to everybody?
Dr. Montoya, Madam Chair, right now it's open to everyone, from AAs on down to, parent liaisons. So it's not exclusive, or it's everyone who uses their own private vehicle to go. It might be to run an errand, to visit a school, to do whatever. If it's within in district, they put it in their mileage log, and we gave the actual procedures, have a sample, and it tells employees how to fill it out. So right now it's just open to everyone.
Go ahead, Ms. Longoria.
Dr. Montoya, Mr. Garcia, I was under the understanding that only certain employees were allowed to travel because of the liability. Say a secretary is on her way to another campus to drop off a report, or here to the main office, and she has an accident. Who's going to be liable then? Does she have to pay out of her personal insurance? So I know when I was here, we had cut down and cut back as to who could claim mileage.
That's why I asked that question, because I thought it was only certain individuals. But then again,
and if I may, what I'm hearing you say is that we don't have anything written in policy as to who can and can be used to take something from one school to another or to the main office. And from what I'm hearing is that we need to establish maybe a policy where only certain employees are designated as the employees that will be traveling to and from a main office or another school to deliver documents or pick up documents that are needed. Because right now it's pretty much blanket across. Whoever principal can say, Miss so-and-so, can you please run and do that? And Miss Longoria brings on a good point. So what you're asking is that maybe we should have some kind of established policy that limits who is allowed to travel to and from for school business and then be reimbursed on mileage. Am I correct?
And Mr. Garcia.
Dr. Montoya, basically, yes. In other words, right now it's open-ended, anybody and everybody. It's something that we would need to look into and come up with procedures and then enforce those procedures. And again, it is a cost. Right now it's at $220,000 that we spend for in-district travel. That's something that we can look at a potential cost savings if we limit it to just, again, parent liaisons or home visitors or certain designated groups.
Yes, and if I may, we can also implement, instead of sending somebody 3 times a day to the main office to get constant papers, and I know sometimes, we do need stuff, if they could be more conscious of the fact that they need to minimize this, because that's $250,000 on reimbursing mileage. That's somewhere where we could look at and maybe minimize that and bring it down a lot.
And I think that's something, Mr. Garcia, that we've talked a little bit, but now the focus needs to be, as we said, and as the board is saying, is on a procedure and a policy that we can all live with more specifically who would be the persons that can claim mileage and the reasons and all of that. So I think we'll be coming back to you with that.
Ms.
Something
Garcia.
for a policy
go
committee.
ahead, Ms. Longoria.
I believe it was an administrative guideline, if I'm not mistaken. And this document here, who provided this? From finance, and how long has this document been in place?
Go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Montoya, Ms. Longoria. If you notice, it's fiscal year 1011, and then it says on the bottom of the first paragraph where it says mileage rate, it says the Brownsville Independent School District will reimburse mileage at the rate of 45 per mile effective January 1st, 2011, and will remain in effect for fiscal year 1011 and thereafter until further notice. And there hasn't been a change in the reimbursement rate, so this still stands.
Okay, so this document was developed in 2010, in the year 2010, fiscal year 2010, 2011.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because I didn't recall seeing this document before.
It became effective in 2011.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and if we don't do a policy, perhaps you can just have an administrative guideline.
Maybe an administrative procedure, and we come back to the board with that, Mr. Garcia. So.
And just for, it went into effect fiscal year 1011.
Yeah. I have some questions under miscellaneous. I don't know.
Go ahead, Ms. Longoria.
When Mr. Garcia gets through.
That was all that I had brought into.
Under miscellaneous? Okay. It has to do with staffing. And I missed the beginning of the meeting. Perhaps you went over that.
If you excuse me, I have a commitment and that I have to be at, so I apologize, but I think we pretty much covered everything, so I'm going to go ahead and leave.
Okay.
So if you'll please excuse me.
Thank you, Ms. Peña, for being here today.
Okay. I was informed or heard that some maintenance positions had been closed or deleted. I think it was mentioned at the last facilities meeting when we were talking about licensed.
Maybe to begin with, well, Dr. Atkinson, go ahead.
We were talking about licensed
The journeyman and the plumbing.
AC and electricians. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Montoya, members of the board. Ms. Longoria, I think that was at the time that they were doing some cost savings back in June of last year. Each of the departments was asked to look at current vacancies and to look at which ones could be defunded for this school year in order to make sure that we were able to balance the budget effectively. So each of the departments, and there were several departments at that time, defunded several slots. And I believe maintenance closed anywhere from 9 to 12 positions that were vacant. They did not move people out and then close them. They were vacant at the time that they were closed.
Dr. Montoya or Mr. Haynes, do you know what positions those were that were closed, that were vacant and closed?
Mr. Haynes, do you have that list?
Dr. Montoya, if I may, I do have a list. Could I approach the members to give them a copy?
Yes. Why don't you go ahead, see if you have that. So.
Was it this?
Okay, so all these positions were vacant and closed, or is that what happened?
Dr. Atkinson, I guess again, if I understand you correctly, or Mr. Haynes, they were vacant, right?
Dr. Montoya, members of the board, yes, they were vacant at the time.
And not filled.
Okay, and according to your email or Mr. Cesar's emails, that he would like to reopen these positions. Are they needed? I assume they are.
Go ahead, Mr. Haynes.
This time, yes, they're looking at that. They do need some of these positions reopened due to the fact that there are, of course, more schools and there's more maintenance being needed at these schools.
Yeah, because at the facilities meeting, I know we had a concern that we had licensed electricians and AC technicians, and for some reason they were not hired or not doing the work. So did we ever look into that?
That's being processed right now, the licensure in the electrician area and the plumbing area. So that's, as we're sitting here, that's being processed to get some of our people to have that license.
And do you, are you visiting these positions where you can reopen them?
I don't know. This is something I think we need to discuss some more, Dr. Atkinson. Go ahead and
Mr. Garza's up there, and I have a question for him, too.
Dr. Montoya, I'm sorry, this is the first that I've seen this, so I couldn't comment on it further.
Can I, okay, you have a question, you regarding the positions?
Yeah, no, it's, if Mr. Haynes, have you worked to see if you could get some of these positions reopened?
Dr. Montoya, may I? No, at this time, no. This was also a new item that came up that they have been questioning as far as why some of the positions were closed. And at this time, may I call Mr. Garza? He
Sure.
can more or less explain a
Sure.
little bit more on
Mr.
why.
Garza, if you'd like to come to the podium, please.
Madam Chair, Dr. Montoya, Ms. Longoria, my understanding was that last year during the budget process, these positions were open and were never filled and then closed during, I guess, the budget process. Mr. Haynes asked me if there is a need for this position. I met with my staff, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Bochas, and the rest of the staff there. And we do need, and by the reasoning that Mr. Haynes was saying, you know, we do have all these new schools. We're opening Breeden. We're opening the new Becks, the new BAC. So we would need these positions open if possible, if there's a way to open up during the budgetary process.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question for administration and Mr. Garza or Mr. Haynes. And I'm just telling you because I'm asking, and I'd like to see how, when, let's say a plumber goes to a job site, do you actually know how long it takes for them to do a job? Let's say that I have a plumber goes to go fix a faucet. Would you be able to account that that faucet will be fixed within 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 16 hours? Is there any way that we know that our manpower is really being worked on? I don't have a problem opening positions, but are we really, really making sure that our workers are taking the time that it's needed? Because I've experienced, and I'm just sharing this, when I was with a district, to change a faucet, it took 2 days. And I was pretty devastated. And I asked, well, are we changing the whole sink? Are we changing the water lines? Or because it was just the faucets that were broken. So at that time, I witnessed that it took 2 days with the parts there. So, you know, I know that in the private sector, if I have 16 employees on the floor selling, every employee has to account for every hour with how they're being productive. So I just have a concern that you know, we need to make sure, because 2 years ago in 2008, maintenance had all these positions available, and we were hiring left and right without any control of hiring people in that department. So, and the reason why I'm saying this, because when I worked at maintenance and facilities, I mean, we kept up with, it was some sort of a form, and you knew that crew was going to take 24 hours to do the construction of the building, or, you know, 3 days, 4 days. And let's say they needed a plumber and they needed the bricklayer. They knew exactly manpower hours. So, you know, I don't have a problem, but in 2008 when I came on board, there was a lot of staff being hired in that department, and I don't know if they were overstaffed, they were understaffed. I'd like to see a report, really. And I know there's schools that are being built. I don't have a problem, but I just, the experience that I've had, that's why I'm saying it. I don't know.
To answer your question, Ms. Presas, I have the same concern when I moved into the new position just a few months ago. One of the things that we're trying to do is to monitor how long it takes for different jobs. We're monitoring when the people, the crew went out with a work order. When they came back, who signed at the school, the head custodian, let's say there was a shower that was leaking, the time, so we can monitor how long it's taking for certain jobs to do and question if we find that, well, how come, this took so long? We are initiating that as we're speaking with the foreman and the new staff that we have there now. And we're trying to reduce time. There's a lot of items that sometimes we don't have in stock, and that's a reason, and we're looking at that too. Why, if something took longer, what was the reason? Sometimes, they had to make 2 trips. Well, that's not acceptable. You have to come back for something, you get everything you need in 1 trip.
Well, because it's on the request order.
Right.
It's there on the maintenance request.
That's correct. So we're working on that and trying to reduce, the time it takes to do every job. One of the things we're looking at is a closer monitoring by the foreman, and with a new staff, additional supervision, is to be out on the field and monitor all the crews as much as we can and be sure that their time is spent effectively. With that said, we don't have any concrete numbers yet. We're trying to do a more efficient job. We're actually going back right now 6 months, because some of the complaints we're getting from the campuses, well, I did a work order back in June last year, and then I did another work order in October this past year, and now I'm doing one in April because nothing got done. And we're going back and saying, well, why didn't this work orders get done? Well, the crew went out, they didn't have the part. They had to order the part, and then it just fell through the cracks. But we're trying to get a more efficient monitoring of all the situations, of all the work orders, and have the people accountable. Put the time that you went out, the time you came back, signed by the person at the school, that yes, these persons were there for 2 hours or whatever it took to finish the job.
And go ahead, Ms. Longoria.
Mr. Garza, I know you just came on board, and Mr. Haynes, you did too. These are key positions, like the electrician, the AC technician, the plumber, carpenter. Why were these positions not filled? I mean, are you? And I see your email where you say you'd like to have these reopened. Have we been, or had the previous administrator been hiring outside plumbers, outside electricians to do the work?
No. What I understand from that list is those positions were open because, because of the previous early retirement packages. Some people had retired. Actually, we had one person pass away, unfortunately. So there was openings that were being advertised at the time. But around a year ago at this time, during the budget process, those positions were closed and said, we're not going to hire anybody. So nobody got interviewed, after that point for those positions. So now we're asking if it's possible, and maybe if not all of them, there's some that are more critical, like the ones you mentioned, the HVAC, electricians, plumbers, carpenters. Probably we can, wait for another fiscal year on those people. But, there's some critical areas, especially the HVAC and electrical,
right,
where we do feel we are short, just from the short time we've been there and looking at the work orders that are coming in.
But you're not aware whether they had been hiring outside plumbers, outside electricians, to your knowledge?
Well, there is electrical companies, plumbing companies that are on bid. So there's a job, and I'll give you an example. There was, I think, a concern about a job we did at Lopez a few months ago, where we actually had a contract, a plumbing company. The reason is we had to change, I think it was a 400-gallon boiler where you needed to have certain qualified boiler technicians that we don't have in our maintenance crew. So in that case, we go out and contract a company.
Right.
So we did that just a few months ago at Lopez. But for normal operations like a leak, shower, or something like that, we would not contract an outside company.
Okay, Dr. Montoya, is it possible that you all can revisit this, see if it's possible to at least open some of these positions that are key positions?
I think, Ms. Longoria, Madam Chair, I think we can revisit. And I think, Mr. Garza, you hit it on the head that we may not be able to fill all of them, but maybe we can negotiate down to key areas that we might need, and then we'll see through HR and Mr. Garcia, how we can fund these, et cetera. So I think we can revisit this and maybe come back to the board. Dr. Atkinson?
Thank you, Dr. Montoya. Just to let you know, we did a brief calculation of the positions that we had on our list. It basically told us to about $274,000, and that's just based on the list that we have. So definitely something that we can revisit with Dr. Montoya. But do know that that's what we're looking at.
Also, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to have a comment on cutting down on overtime. I know last year we paid like $4.5 million overtime, something like that, right, Mr. Garcia?
Go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
Dr. Montoya, I would have to run the exact number to see how much overall we paid.
Oh, I'm not in maintenance. Just
overall,
district-wide.
Yeah,
overall,
district-wide. That sounds about right. Yes, ma'am.
Because I believe that if we really cut down on overtime, that would really help us to give our employees a better raise. And also, on another note, that's on the donating monies to these entities, different entities. Like Ms. Peña said, we're in a very tight budget right now, and this is why I was not very willing to donate money at the last board meeting to one of the organizations. I believe we donate to several entities, and I think we need to revisit that, and perhaps if we want to contribute, we might look at a lower contribution, lower donation.
And again, with due respect to this board, it was all those things were approved, but in the near future, I think we can revisit some of those organizations that we are members of, that we pay funding to see if those are, where we can save money in the future. So,
well, what is it that they're doing for us, really? What are we benefiting out of them? I think the question was, and some of our other colleagues stated, they need to come and give us a presentation every 2-3 months. This is what your money has done. This is where we're at. And they need to, just like they come and ask for the money, they need to come and give us an update personally and say, this is where we're at, this is what we've done, this is where we're heading.
And I think, Mr. Garcia, that was something we had talked about, to get all of them. And it may be a special meeting depending on the number, but yes, to share specifics as to what we're paying, but also what the district is getting out of that whole process.
Also, how many employees does maintenance department have, more or less, give or take? Because facilities, I know it's a small crew, but maintenance itself?
Ms. Garcia, we have approximately 250 employees.
Okay.
If I may, on the overtime issue, we're working pretty much with flex time in our maintenance department. We're down to a few hours a week in overtime. Obviously, there will be occasions when we need overtime. One of the areas that I'm looking at right now is during graduation week, where there's 5 graduations that week, one every night. Obviously, the maintenance crews have to be there, so it's very hard to give flex time, because of the 5-day graduation schedule. So there will be occasions where I will have to submit to Mr. Haynes some overtime. But right now, on a weekly basis, we're around 10 hours a week, and just when there's real special problems, like right now, I just got a call from Mr. Martinez. We have a leak over at Morningside. water leak, so we got people out there. It'll be a few hours, but we're really trying to keep it at a minimum.
And honestly, Dr. Montoya, Mr. Garza, I think we understand, but the process of overtime, we understand emergency situations, but just because we didn't get to finish the job and it can be done the next day, I think that's, we need to kind of, the corporate world does it, we should be able to do it. I mean, we have to be really, really careful. So, I commend you for the work that you're doing. I know that, that you'll be able to do a good job. You have some good staff there. And I guess administration will visit these positions. So, and I know it's not easy because I mean, I've been there. But also I have a question on the maintenance order request. They're doubling them up. They're even putting 3 times the same maintenance request instead of deleting it and then just, or what's...
Well, we're going back because when I started there back in February, we were getting mainly from principals, well, through Mr. Haynes, saying, we got a work order, and we submitted another work order, and now we're going to submit a 3rd work order for the same problem. And what we were doing is starting to go back and say, well, why did this happen? And in most cases, it was a situation where the crew went out there, they didn't have the part, they either ordered the part, it came in, but the work order, for some reason, never got finished. And now we're going back and we're trying to finish all those items and catch up with all the backlog of work orders that, for whatever reason, and mostly it was because the parts were not available, and when they finally ordered the part, for some reason, they never went back and did the job. So we're trying to monitor those work order situations a lot closer.
Go ahead,
Ms. President. Another reason that they have back work orders is they were looking at emergency work orders were being prioritized, and so the other ones were kind of left behind. So that's another reason that you have, schools continue to ask for or to submit work orders of the same, because that was the priority or the procedure that they were using. Also, there's other things that we've been implementing there at maintenance to make sure that we have cost-effective procedures in place. One of them is making sure that any work order that is being requested, or anytime they are buying, purchasing items to do a work order, we do have people that that are specialized in those areas. For example, HVAC and electrician and things like that. That they know what is being ordered, and then once it's ordered and they go to the work site, they follow the supervisors or the specialists that do follow the workers and make sure that what is being used out there is the amount that they need, and everything else. So there's a lot of things that are being placed or implemented there at the maintenance to try to save costs or save money, as well as in transportation and things like that.
I haven't seen the budget as of to date on maintenance. Are they still okay? Because I know that in the past they've been before the year was even.
Can I call Mr. Garza?
Because I know that department takes a lot of money. I mean, it needs to be sustained with money.
That's correct. As of the end of I guess what you call the 3rd quarter, which at the end of March, we took a look at it. We had spent about 74% of our budget, so we were pretty much right on schedule to finish the year with our budget. One of the things that we're doing is we're concentrating, like Mr. Haynes said, on maintenance. There's still some work orders that come in which we feel are not maintenance. They're more like new construction type work orders. Those we just put on hold. What we do is get a estimate and we send it back to the school or to the department that requested it. And if they have funds for it, fine, we'll do the work, but if they don't have funds and it's not a emergency or a regular maintenance item that needs to be done, then right now it's been put on hold by that department or that campus until the next fiscal year and see if there's money there.
How much money there's?
So that's how it went, because, you know, if we had continued, we probably would be in problems with the budget today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Garza.
You're welcome.
And we go now, we're going to review, we go to item number 9, the calendar.
Go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
Yes, Dr. Montoya, at the end of each of my presentations, it's the calendar. The next meeting tentatively is set for May 17th. I'll work with Ms. Garcia, our budget chair, to come up with a correct date. We do plan at the next meeting to present the complete compensation plan and also give you a full summary of all funding sources, everything from local to all our supplemental fundings. We're starting to kind of just wrap up the budget process. I think that once we determine the direction we want to take on the items that were discussed, whether option 1 or option 2 or a combination thereof, once we get that, we're pretty much set to start finalizing the budget and bring it for approval. Again, hopefully our goal is the first meeting in June, so we can be complete with it and move on. Looking forward already for next year. I think next year is going to be hard because it's a new biennium.
It's a legislative, 2013.
Next year, I already anticipate it being a hard year with many issues coming into play.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Longoria.
Dr. Montoya and Mr. Garcia and Dr. Atkinson, are you confident that we can go with either one of these two options, 1 or 2? Will be okay?
Yes.
All right, just want to verify. Thanks.
I want to make sure that everybody's going to get a raise. We now go to, it's not on our agenda item, but I'm going to go ahead and public audience. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, Ms. Garcia, Ms. Longoria, Dr. Montoya, administration, and fellow citizens. I have a few questions first. Ms. Garcia, if I could direct this question to Dr. Atkinson through the chair. Did the ratios, the staff to student ratios change in special education at all?
Dr. Atkinson, if you want to go ahead and answer that.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya, members of the board. The ratios, from what I understand from Dr. Garcia, are remaining the same.
Thank you, ma'am. I also want to thank you in looking here that you're also recommending increases for department heads for elementary and middle school. We appreciate that. And I don't know who to put it to, Ms. Garcia, but on the supplemental pay or stipends, they're for dual. If you have a teacher who has a composite in high school for, let's say, history, and is also teaching dual enrollment, do they get both stipends or one stipend?
Go ahead, Dr. Atkinson.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya, members of the board. It's our intent to apply an additional $2,000 stipend if they're in a dual enrollment class.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. The speaking on behalf of the Association of Brownsville Educators, as we said at the last public audience meeting, last BISD board meeting, we are Dr. Montoya's and administration's recommendation for the $1,600 raise for teachers, librarians, and counselors, and 4.25% for all classified employees. I do want to point out at the first TASB presentation on the budget that BISD ranked in the bottom third compared to the other 12, 13 districts, or 11, 12 districts that we compete with. By these raises, you move us up to the middle of the pack. If we go any longer, then when it is time to try and catch up with the competitors, you're going to have to dig a little deeper into the pockets. And we appreciate any raises, but we would appreciate a little bit more. Question to the CFO, if possible, through the chair. In the last biennium, over last year's budget and this year's budget, how much did we get cut from the state overall?
Mr. Garcia, you may have more information there.
Yes, Dr. Montoya, it wound up being 5%, which from the state funding perspective, close to $18.5 million.
It was roughly $16 million last year and then $2.5 million this year. Is that correct, sir?
Actually, this year is an additional 5.
Okay.
A total of 24 when you look at both bienniums.
Altogether.
I'm looking at both. Thank you. $24 million cut. I'm not sure if the board is aware, but Governor Perry on April the 20th came out with his compact for Texas, and his recommendation there is to double the cuts in public education. Okay. If we have double the cuts, I am a rhetorical question. I do not think that we will be able to continue without laying off people. Bring this up because we've come to the board on 3 different occasions asking for the board to pass a resolution on please supporting Stop the Cuts, Save Public Schools. We continue to ask for that. At the same time, would like to invite you to a mixer we are having this Monday with our state president, Rita Haker, from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock at Cobbleheads. Representative Renee Oliveira will be there to sign Stop the Cuts. And we hope that our own school board will also support public education and pass the resolution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Mr. Borrego?
George Borrego, representing the Association of Brownsville Educators. Proud President, Smiley, you are a magician. You're doing wonders. I don't care what anybody else tells you. You're getting money out of some hat. Keep doing it. Thank you very much for your support for our employees. In Proposal 2, if we can get that through, we are all going to be heroes. And I'm talking about throughout the state. Now, there is a new mindset in this community, in this state, and in this country about the fact that we do have to limit our expenses. We do have to budget. The feds are in trouble. The state is in trouble. But we're not. We're doing very well. And that's because of the fiscal conservative policy of this administration. So let's try to see if we can do proposal number 2 and no layoffs, and we will continue to be a model district for this state. People look to us already because of our accomplishments. Now they can look at us because of how we're taking care of our employees. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? One announcement that we have. Dr. Montoya?
Porter softball playoff game tonight at 7 p.m. at Porter. They are still in the hunt, possibly to move up. So, just wanted to make that announcement. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya. With all that, now we will adjourn. Meeting is now adjourned.